I'm Matt Byram, and this is the Marketing Strategies Podcast, where I speak with interesting and well-respected marketers from high-growth companies. We'll discuss the strategies they've used to generate traffic, acquire new users, and grow their business.
I know on day 30 if you are going to renew or churn on day 365.
It's a little bit of mind control.
You need to reach the leads in a specific time frame. The faster, the better.
When something works, don't do more like it, do more with it.
If you're selling to a very finite audience, an inbound model is going to be grossly inefficient.
This audience has what top questions, and then make sure that you have an answer to each of their questions.
We don't hire professional writers to write for the blog. We hire sales operations practitioners.
Whoever gets closest to the customer wins.
Thank you for joining me for today's episode of the Marketing Strategies Podcast. Today I'm joined by Dave Charest, who is Director of Content Marketing at Constant Contact. Dave joined Constant Contact back in 2011 and is responsible for bringing in new customers and helping customers become successful with their product. In addition to this, Dave is a regular blogger and a self-confessed marketing enthusiast. It's a pleasure to have Dave with us today to talk everything about marketing strategies. So hey Dave, how are you doing today?
Matt, very well. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's great to have you. So Constant Contact has been in business for 20 years. That's an impressively long time for a marketing software business. Yeah. You guys must be doing something right.
Yeah, I think we were one of the first to really recognize that email marketing was something that would work really well for small businesses. So I've been going strong since. Yeah,
absolutely. And what position was Constant Contact in when you joined the business? What did they have? Because that was, say, 13 years in, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a little. I've been with the company for about a little over 6 years now, going on 7. And I think when I joined the Constant Contact, I came in as a content developer, and we were really just building out. Constant Contact has always done a lot of work in the field, presentations to small businesses, that type of thing. And at the time, we were really looking to get a lot of that stuff online, build out a company blog, start doing some more kind of social-related content, things like that. And I was just part of that team getting together and building out that. And so my team is primarily responsible for channels like our blog. We do webinars each month. We also create content for other areas of the business to help with their campaigns and their processes and things like that. But it's been an interesting ride, and we've been able to do a lot of really great work and kind of build the readership on the blog and bring in lots of search traffic and do those types of things. So it's been really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like an interesting ride. Would you say that over the last 7 years, things have become you've become more process oriented? You've actually worked out which strategies and channels work for you best and really nailed down and focused on them?
For sure. I think focus is a great word to say there. I think you find some interesting things working for a larger organization. There are typically, I think, folks that are doing this from a content perspective too will resonate with the fact that there are sometimes different groups within the organization that are creating content, and so it becomes kind of a big thing to kind of manage internally. And so it's really understanding like who those people are, getting everybody kind of on the same page, just so that we're all kind of telling one story as a business, and there's a certain level of quality that's being sent out to our customers or prospects for that matter. So it's that. And then really just looking at, some of the things that we're doing and saying, okay, how do we do that better? And questioning things in a way that makes us say, okay, do we have to do it this way? Is there another way to do that kind of gets us some better results?
Yeah, and do you test a lot as a team? Is that a big part of what you do, is testing channels or marketing methods, different strategies and tactics?
Yeah, I think what we do on our team is we're focused on really looking at things from a content perspective, in the sense that like what are we writing is going to resonate, right? So we work really closely with our social media team. We also work really closely with our customer success team. And so when we're creating content, we're really trying to, one, pay strict attention to who it is that we're trying to reach, right? And for us, that's typically, a small business owner that's a business owner first and marketer by necessity. So they don't necessarily have a marketing background. And so we really try to hone in closely to those folks. We spend a lot of time talking to them. My team will actually sit down and talk about like best practices and think of strategies to work with people on that. And in that sense, we create the content and see if we can get better results, right? One of the things that we do is we hold at least a monthly webinar, and we look at the registration numbers for those, see if we're hitting the mark with the types of things that we're hitting on. Are we hitting the right pain points and helping people be successful with those things? And so we'll look at things like that, and also just the process by which we were doing. When I first kind of started taking over the webinars that we were doing, we were looking at a place where I was like, we're doing a lot of these. We were getting decent but not great registration numbers. And I started to think, is there a different way that we can do this? Is there a way that, one of the ththings with content is you get seduced into this idea of creating more and more, but not really thinking about like the promotion and the effectiveness of that. And so the way we will look at it is, okay, well, how can we do less so we can get more? So we really changed kind of the frequency that we were doing, and also just changed some of our promotional methods of that stuff. And the first go around with this, it was pretty exciting because we were able to increase our webinar registrations by over 1,000%. And then from there, I always kind of look at things on an iterative process. So we're doing V1, right? And then we're getting feedback from that. And then we're going to go back to it and we're going to do V2. And then, an example, after that first increase, we're able to increase again an additional 181%. So it's really about honing in onto who that customer is, what are those pain points, and presenting things in a way that are engaging, compelling, and help them solve those issues. And particularly with a small business audience, I think it's one thing to give people best practices, and it's another to give them kind of the step-by-step methodology with which they can execute against that. And so that's where we've been trying to move with things and been seeing some really great results with that.
And it sounds like you're really using creating marketing content as a support tool, really.
Yeah, I look at it as really kind of across 4 buckets for our business. It's really where we have stuff in a prospect bucket. For us, a big thing is to drive trials. So we look at through the trialer bucket. Then we look at the customer, and then I would say an advanced customer bucket. And so from a prospect perspective, we're really looking to give people or create content that gives them kind of quick wins, so we can build that relationship and trust with people. In the trialer bucket, we're really looking to help create content that gets people to achieve or serve a particular task and helps them do something quickly and kind of understand how they can use the product. And then from a customer perspective, right, we're really looking to kind of build out a framework for how they start at a base level. Like I said, most people aren't marketers when they come to us, and so we're really trying to help them understand, here's the basics, here's some ways to set benchmarks for yourself, and then here's how you can kind of use the tool the most effectively and just understand marketing in a way that's going to most help your business. And then the advanced bucket is really looking at building on those things that we're teaching people at that base level, and how we can, how can you do that better is really the answer we're trying to answer for people there. And so that's the interesting thing about content, right, is that it does kind of hit many different areas of the business. And so one piece of content could have multiple goals depending on where it's being used, right? So it really changes based on what it is that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I guess, can we dive a bit deeper into that? What does your marketing funnel look like, or where's the entrance point for people to come to you, and then how do you segment them into these different buckets?
Sure. So obviously there's lots of things we do from a high level in terms of paid acquisition and those types of things, and primarily my group is focused on just what we can do from an organic standpoint. And so, like I said, we look at the blog and we look at, okay, what can we bring in from a search perspective? And so somebody looking for something tangential to email marketing or email marketing specific, a particular strategy, something like that, we'll try to create content around that. what are the best subject lines? What are ways to market my business? Things like that.
And will you guys do keyword, sorry to jump in, will you guys do keyword research in terms of finding actually not just necessarily what the pain points are, but then you'll dive into some keyword research tools to actually find what's most searched for around that topic?
Yeah, we'll look for those areas and see what the kind of traffic is, how many people are searching for that. And then we'll build that based out on that, in addition to actually talking to small businesses. And like I said, we do a lot of work in the field where we're actually in front of small businesses a lot. And so we try to, capture those questions people are asking. I usually try to keep things from an organic place first, in the sense of what are the questions that we're hearing, what are the things that people are asking us, and then how do we create content to answer that for those people. And then if that's something we see is getting some wind, then we'll look at that, and then we'll tweak that, and we'll create content around it to further out the SEO piece of it, right? And so we really write for people first and kind of SEO second. But then there are particular times where we'll do a campaign that's designed to increase rankings for certain things, right? And so again, it really kind of depends on what stage that we're in with that.
And do you have specific guidelines in terms of the content you're creating? For example, the length or depth of the content, depth of the writing that you would actually go into in a particular post?
Yeah, we typically, so obviously from an SEO perspective, we want to have something that's at least 300 words, something like that, right? But I think we don't have a standard word count. We find some things that go into things more depth, are kind of longer, have more weight, and actually offer more. But we really try to base it on the audience. And so really what I try to do is, like, our posts need to be as long as they need to be to convey the information that we need to convey. And so they have to be concise and they have to be helpful. And so we think of it in those terms. So that way we're not wasting anybody's time or just doing something because we want to, game a particular system necessarily, but we're really focused on how is this particular piece going to help the person reading it? And is it giving them all the things that they need to be able to do that? And so that's really how I judge it. It's not a hard word count or anything like that, other than those guidelines as in what like Google may particularly look for in terms of the basic length. But more so we're focused on making sure that we're fully explaining a situation, answering potential questions and objections that somebody may have when they're reading it, but then kind of summarizing that information and then giving them something that they can do right away to take the next step or get started with that thing. I think that's what we find works best.
So in terms of posting frequency, how often do you create articles? How many articles would you release in your average week?
Yep, in a week right now we're running on a 3 post a week schedule. So we post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we found right now that gives us a good sense of publishing frequency, so that we're able to do other things obviously rather than just posting all of the time. And we're a relatively small team at the moment, so you have to kind of match that with what you can actually do. And then with that, we also find that gives us the ability to promote the content in a good way. So like I said, we work really closely with our social media team, who will be publishing that content out on social media, on our social media channels. We also have a couple of newsletters that we produce. So we have one where people can actually register to get tips directly from the blog. So every time a new post is published, they'll get an email about that particular post. And then we also have a bigger newsletter that kind of goes out twice a month, and that's where we kind of pull in kind of the top content and some webinar information and things like that. And so we find for us that gives us a good frequency of, one, not overburdening our small business customers with information, but also gives us enough in order to promote it, and actually gives people a chance to gives that content some more life. Because I feel like one of the things you can run into is when you are publishing so frequently, and in the beginning when we first started, we were actually publishing a lot because we were trying to make up ground in terms of having more content available. And so that was our goal, was to get a bunch of things to have. But then once you kind of get that and things start to settle, and then it's like, okay, now what do we really need to do, and how can we expose this stuff in a better way, that's where you really start thinking about the frequency and what is actually necessarily to be most effective for the particular business. And I think it varies based on your type of business. I think especially when we're thinking of a small business, sometimes once a week, every other week, something like that is probably okay. But if you're, depending on your industry, if you're a bigger company and you're more on the publishing side of things, right, it may make sense to publish multiple times a day, right? So yeah. I think it really just depends on what your goals are, what your team can handle, and, what's going to be most effective for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was speaking with Kevin Lee from Buffer the other day, and he said almost a very similar thing to what you said. They used to post a lot of content, almost up to three articles a day, 3 pieces of new content a day in some cases, but they scaled back quite considerably just for quality over quantity, and not necessarily that they were producing bad quality, but they found actually that their numbers didn't drastically change by producing a lower quality of lower frequency of content. They actually just were able to put more effort and time into the pieces they did create, which is really, really interesting. And they've actually followed a similar sort of trajectory to yourself, where they used to create a lot of content but have started creating fewer pieces. Quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think the other interesting piece about that now is too, because we've been doing it for a while. Like I said, I've been with Constant Contact for about a little over 6 years now, and being able to kind of go back and look at what those numbers are and how those change, and you actually really start to see trends, and you can start to really understand like what pieces are actually driving most of the benefit, depending on what you're trying to do with that particular goal. And looking at that and seeing that you probably find that 10 to 15% of the content you're creating is actually driving the majority of the things you're hoping to drive with it, right? So it's really gives you that opportunity to say, step back and say like, all right, we're actually not doing as much as we think we're doing by doing more. It's really being smarter about it and building content out around those top performing pieces that really helps you kind of move the needle in a way that, it's sometimes counterintuitive, right? You think more is better, but, and not to address quality. I think quality is always the most important. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and I read a post by HubSpot stating a very similar thing, actually, that they analysed all their content and they found that, I think it was 50 pieces were actually providing the biggest proportion of traffic to them. And, I guess you have to actually create lots of content to actually find those 50 pieces. Right. But it comes to the point where there's certainly a small number of pieces that are actually generating you the most revenue or profit or sales or sign-ups or whatever that might be.
Absolutely.
So I looked on SimilarWeb for Constant Contact, and it seems direct traffic is a huge driver for you. This may be inaccurate, but the next biggest driver was mail, followed by search. I guess you guys are very heavily focused on search with your content that you create. And then how would that be accurate to say that search is a big driver for
absolutely
new signups?
Yeah, especially when we think of, so we kind of look at the website as kind of there's the main website that is really the acquisition site, and then there's the content side, which we're at, and our job really is to be supportive to the main website, right? And so we're trying to get those people that aren't necessarily looking for purchasing email marketing, right? That's the main website's job. That's the acquisition website job. We're looking for those people that may be looking to find out more information, or thinking about other ways that they can market their business. And so we're able to capture those people and talk about things that we may not necessarily talk about on the main website, right? And so from a search perspective, definitely, our traffic comes in primarily from that source. And it's just a good way to start to capture those people kind of in the longer tail, right? Looking for things that may eventually lead them down the path. And it's really a way for us to start that conversation with folks in the sense of building that relationship and earning some trust. And we're always looking for, how can we provide information and then point them to email marketing, the product, when they're ready to get that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So again, comes back to the supportive marketing tactics, really, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And then I noticed that the content. I noticed that the Constant Contact website is really straightforward. It doesn't really have many pages, and the pages are relatively short. And there's also a lot of prominent sign-up buttons. And even in fact, when I visit the page from a UK location in a normal browser window, I go to an international landing page that's even shorter without any navigation. And I presume this has come from testing, experimenting, and user testing. Is that right? Is this something that's a big focus for you guys?
Yeah, we've got a great web team that really kind of works on those things. That's consistently looking for the best ways to, get people in and do that. And there's always something that you can you may find yourself in terms of like a test or what they're trying to accomplish, or messaging, or the length of the page, that type of thing. And so they do a really great job with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys are like super focused, laser focused on conversion rate optimization, testing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which you can tell. Super short pages with sign up buttons.
Yep.
And would you say that your team, the search and content team, are you as laser focused on SEO, around the metrics and the technicalities of SEO, or are you've mentioned a lot around you creating content to support your customers and their needs and their questions?
Yep.
Does that go hand in hand with the technical side of SEO, or how do you view that?
So it's a supportive channel there for that. From the SEO perspective, we do work closely with our SEO people to look for those areas that again may not be serviced by the main website. And so we're tightly knit in terms of like, okay, here's an opportunity where we may be able to catch somebody for these particular terms, or we see a lot of people looking for this particular thing, and how can we do that? But then also, how can we support the pages that we do have built out from a feature perspective, or that we have those deeper pages that explain things on the site. And so we're definitely always looking for that. And I would say the other piece of it, and that's just one slice of it. I mean, I think a little earlier we had talked about that idea of content kind of touches many areas of the business and many areas of the kind of customer life cycle. And so when I think about looking at what we do, that is one area. So I kind of break it up, and this is something I actually learned, which I thought was a great way to kind of think about it, because I was always struggling with that idea of like, all right, there's a lot here. How do you really kind of get your brain around it in a way that shows the impact that content can have and how it touches so many different parts of the organization? And went to one of those Content Marketing Institute workshops, and they had just really great way of looking at it and breaking it into these basically 4 buckets, which is competency, campaign, customer, and cache. And cache is one of those areas where I would put the SEO things, in the sense of how much SEO traffic can we bring into the Constant Contact website that we don't have to pay for. Basically, right? Because we obviously do a lot of things from a paid perspective, right? And so I look at that as cash savings, right? We're bringing X amount of traffic in, that would equate to, this many dollars. So how are we saving money in that instance, right? And so that's one of those areas I would put SEO into. The other areas I mentioned, competency, campaign, and customer, is really, so from a competency level, like when we're looking at how we're going to measure things, right? Really, that's just saying like, how effective are we as a team? And so it's those things that you would look at based on, all right, is the content we're creating resonating with people? Or people attending our webinars? Are people registering for those? Are we, doing the right things or talking about the right things that are getting action or doing the things that we want them to do? And are we just good at creating that content, right? So those are areas there where those are your more day-to-day metrics that you're looking at to try to figure out, like, all right, are we on the right track? And then there's the stuff from the campaign perspective. So like, how can you take what you're learning in that area and then apply that to where we'll be working with people on our marketing programs team, for example? How are we using what we've learned from our competencies to say, okay, here's a tool that will help you most effectively with the campaign that you're running, and maybe that's a guide, maybe that's maybe it's a webinar, maybe it's a piece of content that's designed to do something as part of a program. So how are we providing the right tools for that, and what are those results? And sometimes those may be results that we don't. the content team itself doesn't necessarily track, but the person running the campaign is, right? And so it's really about going back to them and saying, great, you used this thing here. What happened there, right? Or how does that look different from something that you've done before? Because I think really, at least what I'm trying to do is really always show. I feel like there's this, content can kind of make things better in a lot of instances. And so how is somebody that's gone through kind of a content channel, or we've educated somebody to hopefully be able to do business with us, how is that different from somebody that doesn't go through that path, right? And so we're always looking at those things. And then, the last piece I mentioned was the customer perspective. And so how are the things that we're doing helping our customers to either take advantage of a tool or increase usage, or how is it helping people do something, just understand the concept or just help them be more successful? I think that's the end of the day. That's what we're trying to do. And so I kind of look at things in those buckets. It helps me kind of make sense of a little bit more and again, show that breadth of what, content is doing in different areas of the business.
And what type of metrics are you tracking to actually determine success here? What would be your core KPIs for your team in terms of actually your North Star metrics, the things that you actually judge your success based on?
Yeah, sure. So I think, it really depends on, what it is that we're doing with a particular thing. But I think at the end of the day, ultimately we're looking at, are we, what is our costs to bring in new customers or service existing customers? And then we're also looking at, how are we saving, where are we saving money, right? So those are at a high level of really what we're ultimately getting to. But I think for each of these buckets that I mentioned, there are different metrics in there. So we're going to look at things like how many unique visitors are we bringing into the blog? How many people from that blog are we driving to the main website, which is, trying to convert people? We're just going to look at those types of things to give us indicators from a webinar perspective. How many people are we getting to register for a particular webinar? Are those topics resonating well? What are the sources that are driving the traffic to those pages? So it's all of those kind of things that lead up to ultimately those two main metrics that I talked about before, right? Are we bringing in more people? Are we saving money? And that type of thing, right? And so those are the things that we're really interested in. And from the customer perspective, we may be looking at, are we increasing usage for a particular thing? Are we increasing the number of services that we're selling that may offer something? So it really depends on what it is that our particular goal is with a particular program or campaign that we're running. So it shifts in some instances, but end of the day, we're really trying to get to those main metrics.
At the end of the day, it all comes down to new user signups, I guess.
Yeah, well, yeah, for us, absolutely right. But it's that coupled with customer success, right? Because I think retention and engagement is obviously a big one, right? And so you're always looking to. End of the day, really, what we're trying to do is help small businesses do more business. And so when we're looking at it, like, yes, obviously, new customers coming in is a big one, but it's also beyond that is how can we keep those customers and how can we best help them be successful, so they're going to see value in our product and recommend us and stay with us longer and all of that. So they really work really closely together.
And are you able to correlate back to any different type of content or any different entrance point to the amount of retention that you get off a customer at the end of the day?
Yeah, those are things that are a little more difficult to get at and things that we're actually exploring now to try to see how can we do have some insight into, where people are coming from and what the main source was, but that gets into some things that are a little beyond my group in terms of like multi-touch attribution and all of those types of things. But we are looking at that and trying to dig deeper into that information. And one of the things I'm personally digging into with our kind of data people is really looking at. So, for example, we have I mentioned our one of our newsletters. We have a Hints and Tips newsletter, and we're really trying to look at what those would be people that I would consider content consumers. these are people that like to consume, like to learn, and like to try to apply those things to their business. And what does that person look like versus somebody that is not subscribed to that newsletter or not consuming that content, right? And so, and like I said, it's a little bit more difficult to get to, and we're still trying to figure out a lot of that. But that's where we're trying to really see is, okay, what does customer A look like versus customer B, and what can we kind of learn from that? I mean, I think we've all heard stories of what is it, TD Ameritrade, who found that the people that were subscribed to their TD Ameritrade newsletter, Think Money, I think it's called, they found that people that were subscribed to that magazine traded 5 times more than people that weren't.
Because they were more engaged, really.
Exactly, right. And so then it from a strategic standpoint, it makes sense to how can we find more of the people that want to subscribe to this magazine that are used to doing that, because ultimately it's going to be 5 times more effective for us, right? So same kind of idea as we're really digging into that information to see if we can get a wholer picture of what the impact of that content is, and the different ways that people come in through the funnel, right?
And I guess that's it. The more that you can actually support and engage and inspire and educate your customers and prospects, the more likely they are to join your business and stay with them for a longer period of time. So
absolutely.
And it'd be criminal if we didn't discuss email marketing a little bit further.
Sure.
I know we've briefly touched on this, but I'm really interested to learn a bit more about how you guys actually manage your own email strategy, and it'd be interesting to learn a bit more about that.
Sure. So, across the business, there are obviously lots of different, we have a customer lifecycle management team that, builds out email marketing programs based on customers' life cycle and then those types of things. On our side, we're really more focused from an email perspective on the prospect side of things. So we have our newsletter that people can subscribe to. We have our daily blog newsletter that people can subscribe to. And so we're really looking at those things to see, obviously how are we doing in opens and clicks and that type of thing, but what happens to people as they get that information. And so I remember, one of the things that we did when I first started was really take a look at our hints and tips newsletter, and we had quite a bit of information in there in terms of just lots of links, lots of blocks, and lots of things that people could really kind of dig into there. And a lot of times that happens. You end up having something that is a channel that reaches people, and marketing wants to be involved with that, and then somebody else wants to be, and it ends up being this thing where everybody's trying to, can we get this in there? Can we put that in there? And to your detriment, right? Because it ends up not being as effective because the clicks on those are very, very low, right? And so you're just giving a lot of information to somebody. And so one of the things that, for us, what we were able to do is really look at that and remove anything that wasn't, getting a significant amount of information, so we could streamline that for the user. So when they got that, now it's not all of the stuff that they need to look through, but really a select group. I think now we've narrowed that down to about 4 things that we put in our newsletter that allow people to, obviously we have to take into account mobile, and so it's mobile responsive, and we kind of follow this rule for ourselves and for our customers, but in this idea of picture paragraph call to action, right? People are consuming things in smaller bites. How can we give them something that's a quick piece of information, allows them to go find out more, so we get to learn more what people are interested in, and takes them to kind of learn more information. And then we find that email is still a big driver of traffic for us. That's where we'll see the numbers on the blog go up when we share that information. We're going to see those registration numbers go up when we share information about a webinar and those things. So email is still a very important piece of, I think, the online marketing puzzle, because it's still a huge driver of action around people. So it's an important tool for us, for sure.
And it sounds like you're tracking a lot of metrics in terms of the actions that people take and what they do, the engagement that they have with your emails. How do you guys actually action that and change things over time based on what you see?
Yeah, so we look at it based on What are the top things that people are clicking on? So it helps us kind of look at things in terms of positioning. So we'll test things about like, all right, what happens if I put, this article or this information in the first spot versus, the third spot or the second spot where it was. And so it really helps us kind of get an understanding of how people are engaging with the content. We recently did a kind of redesign to make things a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more mobile responsive, and those types of things. And so we're actually in that phase now where we're going to start to see like what's happened, what's been different, or the way people are engaging with this now. And so we really just use that to help us make smarter decisions in terms of like, okay, when we put something in here, what can we expect to see from that? And it helps us kind of know, all right, look, if we need to promote this thing or we want to do something around this thing, this is the better way to do that, right? Or maybe it's over multiple conversations. So we'll have a blog post that talks about something that in the future we'll want to expose as a more kind of a promotional block, let's say, for example, versus just something to kind of learn more about that. So those are the ways we kind of look at it. Again, just to see, how people are responding to the things that we're putting in the email. What are they clicking on? And then at the end of the day, really tying it back to like, all right, are they taking those actions that we want them to take? So it's not just about, so for example, webinars, right? If we put the webinar block in our newsletter, are they clicking it, but are they actually signing up, right? And so what does that look like? And so it really gets to beyond the opens and clicks and more into what are the actions people are taking after they click, right?
And then do you segment people into different buckets and different lists based on the actions that they take so that you can then personalize the content they receive in the future?
Yeah, so we personalize some content at this level. For us on the education side or like the content side, we really look at it and based on the kind of what state they're in. Are they a prospect? Are they a customer? Are they or are they a trialer of our product? And so we segment there at that level. It's not as in depth as things like you're mentioning there. That stuff we definitely do at the CLM level, and do things based on, have particular messages that will fire based on actions people take in those types of emails. And that's where we work closely with that team to provide the right types of content for those particular messages that they're sending out. And I feel those are probably two different goals based on our team and their team, right? We're looking to keep interest, build trust, and build that relationship and keep that relationship warm, whereas they're looking more specifically to drive either product actions or get people into trial or do something like that. So we do that. It's just not so much on our side.
Yeah, and you're really looking for that engagement and to actually build that person's trust and connection with your brand and business rather than actually maybe sell them on to the next product or what have you.
Absolutely.
And how do you see email changing over the next, 5 years? Obviously, as many people know, email has been around a long time now, but it's consistently still rated as one of the top drivers of traffic and engagement over other marketing methods. So it's here to stay for the long term. But how do you feel that might change over the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Like I think, one of the ways we've seen email change up to this point, right, is that I think it used to be a way to kind of get your paper newsletter into a digital form. And it like, we were talking before about having a lot of information in it, right? And I think with mobile devices coming in and the way people kind of engage with those now is, we've seen the more effective pieces really be less those big email newsletters and those shorter messages, right? I mentioned picture, paragraph, call to action, right? That idea of like one idea driving people towards taking one specific action, like those types of messages work best now. And so I think it'll be interesting to see where email goes, right? It's interesting when you still see, the like social media platforms, for example, are still using email to drive people to their sites to get people, and so it's hard to say like there's something that will replace that. I don't think we figured out what that thing is yet, right? So I still feel that that's still going to be like a major driver because we all have to use it, right? Like email, once you get to that point where you're in a job or you're all using email, and email is still one of the things you use to sign up for all these other platforms that you're using. And so it'll be interesting to see if that starts to evolve. But I still don't necessarily see it happening soon.
Soon, yeah. I mean, it still feels like there's a long way to go with like rich media adoption in email and things like that. Really, it feels like we should be further ahead than we really are.
Yeah, and I feel like like email is really starting to do. You have the animated GIFs in there now. I think you're really starting to get the ability to kind of do some video things in some instances. So I think it's actually becoming a more engaging piece of content rather than just a static, here's a message and go do something. So it will definitely be interesting to see how it evolves in those instances. But I also like the idea of really you can do a lot of things from an email marketing perspective, just in terms of, the tools really allow you to do those things that you were talking about in terms of just segmenting people based on what they click and getting the right information to them and using things like, autoresponders or automation to follow up messages. And really, I think when you look at it as a business tool, in particular for small businesses, right? Like, I mean, the main things people are looking to do are get new customers. They don't have enough time to do the things that they want to do, and they want to retain existing customers. If you look at those three challenges that, small businesses have, if we go that angle, I think it's, email marketing really helps solve for a lot of those pain points. And so I think it's still just a very important and effective tool to do that.
100% agree. And one of the things I was going to ask you about is about GDPR coming in UK and Europe over the next month or few months, really. How do you feel that will change the email landscape, and particularly for marketers, really, where there's bigger focus around collecting people's data and using people's data? How do you feel that will change email and email marketing over the coming years?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, right? I think there's lots of sensitivity around data. Obviously, that's a topic that's probably a little over my head in terms of like how we execute against that, and we have a team working on that now and thinking about how that will impact things. But I think it's just when you look at it, it's really about understanding kind of what the real product is in those instances, right? I think, lots of companies aren't necessarily using, or a lot of times people that are using email marketing are doing it to sell a product or a service. Whereas you look at other things that are, you are the product or the service for that particular business, right? Because they're using your information to do things, whereas email is somewhat a tool to allow people to do something. So again, I think it's a little bit beyond my scope in terms of the legalities and what's happening there. But I think it's definitely something that we have to look at in terms of just, what are we doing with that information and what are we making available to people in a way that is helps them without betraying any kind of data information that they shouldn't be available to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel it'll be a good change that people will be using data more as they should do, really, rather than for wrong uses or for exploiting and misusing data. So I feel like it'll be good for the consumer, and I feel like marketers, good quality marketers, will be able to use data more effectively, and actually new marketing methods and tactics will come from this, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, right? There are those the good marketers versus maybe the more black hat marketers, right? I think these things are always good or bring up new innovations or ways of thinking about things for the folks that are trying to do things the right way versus the folks that are trying to do things in a more of a black hat manner, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll bring this back to you and your team. What are the marketing strategies that you're focusing on in 2018? Have you got any big campaigns coming up? Have you got any specific things that you're going to test or try? Anything that's on your radar this year?
The big thing for us this year, and kind of I do this every year, I kind of write down one word or a phrase or a couple of words that really are my focus for the particular year that I hope that we can move. And for us, this actually comes a little bit more internal than external, but it touches on those things, and I'll explain what I mean in a second here. But really, I'm looking at experience and efficiency this year. And by experience, I mean the customer experience. So when they come in or they hear something from us as a prospect, and the content that we're sharing and the education that we're sharing, is that experience or the things that we're saying also reflected in the rest of their experience? So if they talk to somebody on the phone, or if they go into the product, like, are those things that we're doing and the stories that we're telling and the ways that we're helping them be successful, are those things feeling cohesive, and are they moving them through? And like, so for example, if we say here's how you should think about building out your marketing calendar, and then they get into the product and they can use the marketing calendar in the ways that we're showing them, like things like that. Or if you talk to somebody on the phone, are we sharing the same type of coaching across the way? And I think that's one thing that I've been really focused on this year from the things that we're creating and the teams that we're working with, is to making sure that we're providing that cohesive experience for somebody. And then the efficiency piece of it, right? Can we use the main pieces in different areas of the business without having to recreate the wheel? And are we making sure that we're making those things be more accessible to the people that need to use them, so they can do so in a way that is more efficient? So we're not, hey, I just wrote a guide on how to build your email list. I'm working on a guide on how to build your email list too. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of that can sometimes happen, and so we're really looking to eliminate that. So we're using one piece of content in multiple ways, and then I think for us, I mean, we're celebrating 20 years this year, and so we're really looking at some ways that we can kind of share that with our customers and the experience that we've had working with our customers, to help others learn from them and reach new people in the market, to really help small businesses be successful. I think that's the real nice thing about what we're doing from either as we're looking at marketing campaigns, like we're really trying to show people some of the things that are available to them and the ways they can do it, inspire them to be more successful with that. And that's the nice thing about, with Constant Contact, is there's a good group of people that are really passionate about helping small businesses succeed. And so really most of the things that we do are built around that idea. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And you've got 500,000 users, did you say?
Yeah, I think we're at a little over 500,000 at this point.
What an incredible journey. Well, I'd love to bring this to our last 5 questions, if that's okay with you. So, first question, what's your best piece of marketing advice?
Best piece of marketing device is, so I have a philosophy I'm usually talking about with the team all the time, and it's really this idea that all good things come from focusing on the people that you're trying to reach and helping them become more successful. And I think from a marketing perspective, if you stay focused on that, I think anything you create or anything you do is going to feel like a valuable resource to people and not necessarily marketing, right? It's going to be marketing people are interested in versus interruptive type of stuff. So I think that's really important. And I think if you can do that, most of the things that you create or the things you're going to try to do are going to come from the right place and really benefit you in a better way.
I agree. And marketing over the years through content marketing has come much more towards knowledge transfer, really. And I think now we're coming to the point where it's really got to be authentic to really resonate with people. So, your view of supportive marketing is totally where I would see things moving as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And can you recommend a book to our listeners?
So, I was thinking about this one, and so I'm actually in the process of rereading this book right now, and it's actually, I'm a content guy, so I'm always looking at, I love to create, and so I'm always trying to look at, how can I write better? How can I be more concise? How can I get to the point? How can I be more effective? And so a book I kind of always go back to, even though at this point it's a bit dated, but it's a book called Writing That Works, and it's by Roman and Ralphilson, and I believe there are a couple of Ogilvy guys that kind of put this together. But and so I mentioned it's dated because they're talking about, email, mail, and using that as a new channel now. But still, a lot of the principles that they talk about there about being direct and, removing the fluff and doing all that. I enjoy reading it because it gives me that, I need to do this. I need to, do that type of thing. So that's a good book to check out.
So it's got the sentiment, but the tools may have changed a bit.
Exactly, yeah. Like it talks about sending like memos, like really nobody is doing memos anymore. But the application of writing those things, right? I feel like those basic fundamentals of communication are the things that always stay the same. Just the method of which you're using it changes, right? And I think that could be said of everything. So I love those kind of fundamental things that you can apply no matter what. You're using it.
I totally agree, and I love it that you actually go back to read the book.
Right.
From that point of view, that's so cool. And what software tool couldn't you live without?
So again, on the on the writing side of things, I'm a big fan of Grammarly.
Yes.
I like to write, but I write like I speak most times, and so the proper grammar, when necessarily, I don't always catch those things, and that's just a nice tool to kind of put things in and capture things as I'm writing in some instances, depending on what I'm using from a plugin perspective. And so I find that's a really great tool to kind of help edit the things that I'm creating.
Yeah, Grammarly is awesome. We use that in the office too.
Oh yeah, I love it.
And what's your favorite example of a marketing campaign? You touched on Ogilvy as well, and some of their campaigns are still awesome. But what is your favorite example of a marketing campaign?
Yeah, I really enjoy the things that Omaze has been doing. I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but I am. They do. Yeah, my wife and I are big U2 fans. They recently just did one with U2 about going to play mini golf with U2, right? So I think they just do a fantastic job. I mean, if you just go to their website, the way they describe what they do, the writing, the style of the website, I think from an email marketing perspective, they're doing a really great job. And I think they're just doing lots of really great things too. They, use great use of video in their campaigns, great use of celebrity and influencers in their campaigns. Just the messaging comes across great. I think they're really doing some interesting things too. I just got a follow-up email from them the other day about, hey, here's your last chance, and if you make another donation, you can get some more entries into this thing. I think it's just a really smart and effective way to do things, and I think they're doing a really great job with it on all facets.
That sounds cool, and I'll put a link to the book and Grammarly as well as the marketing campaign in the show notes, so if anybody wants to check those out, then they certainly can. Finally, which other podcasts do you listen to?
So it's football season right now. So I do most of my podcast listening in the car, but I've listening to a lot of sports radio with football going on right now. And I'm a New England guy, so we've got the Super Bowl coming up soon. So haven't been doing a lot of listening lately, but when I do, I've been listening to This Old Marketing by the Content Marketing Institute folks, which I believe at this point is now, I think they've stopped it. So I think this was the last year, was the end of the year was the last they've done it. So I have a couple episodes to catch on there. But another one that I enjoy listening to is Startup by Gimlet Media.
Okay.
I think that's really interesting. In particular, the first season of that, where they actually talk about starting up their own business, which is interesting. I love that kind of inside baseball and meta content marketing. I think is pretty cool. And then another one is Unthinkable by Jay Acunzo, who talks really about thinking about things differently to kind of get better results for your business and the things that you do. I think is pretty interesting listen as well.
That's cool. I've got Jay as a guest on the podcast soon, so that'll be in a future episode.
Oh, excellent. I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah, it should be great. Well, Dave, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Really, really interesting hearing about the work that you guys are doing at Constant Contact. I certainly recommend everyone go and check out Constant Contact and the work that they're doing over there. They've got some great articles, and the website and tool is super interesting. So a pleasure speaking to you today, Dave, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Matt. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with your friends. I'd also be extremely grateful if you could rate and review us on iTunes or the channel you get this podcast through. Next week, I'm joined by Joe Chernoff, who is Chief Marketing Officer at Insight Squared. Joe gives us an amazing insight into how their marketing team uses data to predict customer behavior. If you're looking to understand and impact customer behavior, then this is an episode you need to listen to. So, until next time, I've been your host, Matt Byron.